It started on a Monday morning, the kind of day that smelled like burnt coffee, cheap perfume, and quiet judgment. Kwame Mensah walked into the office carrying nothing but a small briefcase, a humble smile, and a thick Ghanaian accent that rolled like music. But instead of music, they heard noise. They didn't see a man trying to build a future, they saw someone who didn't belong. From the very first day, they mocked him, not for what he did, but for how he sounded. Every word he spoke became a punchline, every sentence an excuse for laughter. At lunch, they imitated him. "Good morning, sir," they'd say, mimicking his tone, laughing like hyenas behind his back. The sound of it hurt, but Kwame only smiled, nodded, and kept walking. His father's words whispered in his heart, "Gold does not shine until it is refined." Kwame had left Ghana with nothing but hope and a head full of dreams. He had seen poverty, war, and the kind of struggle that could break a man's spirit. But not his. He came to America believing that if he worked hard enough, the world would eventually listen. Instead, he found that even in silence, people talked. They called him village boy, foreigner, Mr. Can't Speak English. They said it with grins, pretending it was harmless. But every word cut deep. And no one cut deeper than Brian, the senior project manager. Tall, smug, and self-assured, Brian was the kind of man who thought power meant permission. He'd interrupt Kwame in meetings, roll his eyes when he spoke, and once said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Maybe you should learn how to talk before you try to lead." The room laughed. Kwame smiled through the humiliation, his fists clenched under the table, his pride fighting to stay intact. But what they didn't know, what none of them ever cared to see, was that Kwame was no fool. Beneath his quietness was a mind sharp as steel. He had degrees in business management, finance, and leadership, earned through years of sacrifice and night shifts. He was more qualified than any of them, but he chose patience over pride. He worked harder, stayed later, and studied deeper. He believed that true respect couldn't be demanded, it had to be earned. Months passed. Kwame's reports became the backbone of the company's biggest projects. His strategies quietly fixed errors that others couldn't see. But his name? It was never mentioned. His work? Often credited to someone else. And Brian made sure of that. Team effort, Brian would say, smiling proudly at the CEO while Kwame stood in the corner, invisible. Until one day, the company began to crumble. A massive client pulled out. Revenue plummeted. Projects stalled. Morale dropped. The CEO, a calm but sharp woman named Ms. Anderson, watched everything unfold with calculating silence. She noticed who stayed late, who blamed others, and who truly tried to fix things. And one name kept appearing in every successful report, Kwame Mensah. Then came the announcement. A company-wide meeting. The CEO stood before the employees, her tone measured but heavy. After careful review, she said, "I will be stepping down as director. A new leader will take my place, someone who embodies resilience, wisdom, and true leadership." The room buzzed with whispers. Everyone turned to Brian. He sat up straighter, smirking like the throne was already his. "The new director of this company," the CEO continued, pausing for effect, "is Mr. Kwame Mensah." The room froze. You could hear the disbelief in the silence. Mouths dropped. Laughter died. Even the walls seemed to stand still. Brian's smirk vanished. He blinked, stuttering, "Wait, what?" All eyes turned to Kwame, the man they mocked, the accent they mimicked, the voice they silenced. He stood slowly, his face calm, his tie perfectly straight. As he walked to the podium, the same people who once whispered now cleared a path for him. Kwame looked out at the crowd, his gaze steady. "I know," he began, "that some of you have laughed at me. I know that some of you doubted me. But I am here today because I never stopped believing in what my father taught me, that gold only shines after it is tested." His voice carried the same accent they mocked, but now, it commanded the room. "It is not the accent in a man's mouth that defines him," he said firmly, "it is the strength in his heart and the truth in his work." The room erupted, not in laughter, but applause. Those who sneered now clapped. Those who whispered now bowed their heads in shame. But one man wasn't clapping. Brian sat in the corner, his jaw tight, his pride cracked. Beneath his forced smile, anger burned. Because to him, this wasn't justice, it was humiliation. In the weeks that followed, Kwame brought change. He inspired others. Productivity soared. Clients returned. But not everyone celebrated. Brian began working in shadows. Subtle sabotage. Files misplaced. Reports deleted. Rumors spread. "Kwame's not ready. He's just lucky. He can't lead." Whisper by whisper, he built a quiet rebellion. But Kwame saw it, not with anger, but with wisdom. Instead of fighting back with hate, he answered with excellence. Every project he touched turned to success. Every challenge met with grace. Then one night, as the office emptied and the city lights flickered outside, Kwame stayed late reviewing documents. That's when he found it, a file marked confidential. Inside were numbers that didn't add up, contracts signed under fake names, funds that vanished into offshore accounts. And the signature attached to it all was Brian's. Kwame's heart pounded. The man who mocked him, who tried to destroy him, had been stealing from the company. The next morning, he requested an emergency board meeting. The air was thick with curiosity as executives filled the room. Brian leaned back in his chair, confident as ever. "What's this about?" he said, smirking. Kwame stood at the head of the table, calm and composed. "It's about integrity," he said softly. He slid the confidential file across the table. "It's about truth." The board members flipped through the pages. Gasps. Murmurs. Shock. The evidence was undeniable: money trails, fake vendors, false invoices. Brian's face turned red. "This is a setup," he shouted. "He's lying." But the documents spoke louder than his words. One by one, the board turned toward him. "Brian," the chairman said, voice low, "did you authorize these payments?" Brian stammered. I don't recall." But it was too late. The truth was out. The CEO's successor, now watching from afar, had left that file for a reason. She knew what she was doing when she chose Kwame. And as the board voted unanimously to terminate Brian, the same man who mocked Kwame's voice now begged for mercy. "Please," he muttered, "you don't understand." Kwame looked him in the eye and said quietly, "I understand perfectly. I understand what it feels like to be underestimated. I understand what it means to be mocked for what you cannot change. But I also understand this: you reap what you sow." Security escorted Brian out. The office fell silent. For the first time, everyone saw what real leadership looked like: not loud, not proud, but principled. But as the applause faded and the boardroom emptied, something felt off. One of the senior directors approached Kwame quietly. "That file you found," she whispered. "Do you know where it came from?" Kwame frowned. "The CEO left it for me, didn't she?" The woman shook her head. "No. That file wasn't supposed to exist. Those documents were meant to be destroyed." Before Kwame could ask more, her eyes darted nervously toward the hallway. "Be careful," she murmured, backing away. "You're playing with fire you don't understand." That night, Kwame returned home uneasy. His instincts, the same instincts that once kept him alive through the chaos of war back home, told him something wasn't right. He placed the file in his drawer, locked it, and sat quietly in the dark. Then, a sound, faint, outside his window. A shadow moved. The phone rang once. Then twice. When he answered, a voice on the other end spoke, low and threatening, "If you value your life, forget what you saw." The line went dead. Kwame's blood ran cold. His mind raced. Who was behind this? Was it Brian? Someone higher? Something bigger? He looked out at the dark city skyline, his reflection staring back in the glass, a man who had fought too long to back down now. He whispered to himself, "Truth cannot hide forever." But as he turned away from the window, headlights flashed across his apartment wall, a black car idling outside, engine running. His phone buzzed again, this time with a message that made his heart stop cold. "You shouldn't have opened that file." The screen fades to black, the narrator's voice steady and chilling. Kwame thought the fight ended when he exposed Brian. But what he didn't know was that he had only pulled back the first layer of a far deeper corruption, one that would soon test not just his courage, but his life itself. The night after the threat, Kwame couldn't sleep. His mind replayed the message over and over, "You shouldn't have opened that file." The city outside his window pulsed with restless light, but inside, there was only silence and the steady drum of his heartbeat. He checked the locks twice. He thought about calling the police, but deep down, he knew this wasn't a problem the police could solve. The kind of men who sent messages like that didn't fear the law, they owned it. He remembered the woman from the board who had warned him, her voice trembling when she said, "You're playing with fire." He hadn't believed her fully then, but now he could feel the heat closing in. Still, Kwame wasn't the kind of man to back down. He had faced worse than this: hunger, humiliation, the ache of starting over in a land that mocked his very existence. If this was a fight, he would face it standing tall. The next morning, Kwame arrived at the office early. The air was thick with tension. Whispers followed him like shadows. Some employees looked at him with quiet admiration, others with fear. Brian was gone, but the damage he caused wasn't. There were still loyalists, people who had benefited from his corruption, people who wanted Kwame gone. And now, those same people were moving silently, like snakes in tall grass. He walked into his office, sat at his desk, and opened his laptop, but it was already on. His files were open. His email, logged in. His stomach dropped. Someone had been here. He scanned the screen, his eyes narrowing. A draft email he hadn't written sat in his outbox, filled with forged evidence that made it look like he had been part of Brian's corruption. A setup. A perfect trap. "Smart move," he muttered under his breath. "Frame the foreigner." He deleted the message and locked the system down, but he knew, this wasn't over. Whoever he was up against wasn't just Brian's ghost. This was an organized effort to silence him completely. By noon, an emergency meeting was called by the chairman. The atmosphere was thick, suffocating. When Kwame entered the boardroom, all eyes turned to him. The chairman's face was grim. "Mr. Mensah," he said slowly, "serious allegations have been brought against you. Funds missing. Documents signed under your authority. We've received evidence this morning." Kwame's heart sank. The same forged files. The trap had been sprung. He stood tall, voice steady. "That evidence is fake," he said. "Someone is trying to bury the truth." The chairman's gaze hardened. "Do you have proof?" Kwame looked around the table, at the faces of people who once clapped for him, now turning away. "The proof," he said, "is in who benefits from my downfall. Brian may be gone, but the system that protected him isn't. The same people who hid his crimes are trying to silence me because I refuse to stay quiet." A heavy silence filled the room. The chairman rubbed his temples. "Mr. Mensah, until we can verify your claims, you are hereby suspended." The words hit like a hammer. Gasps rippled through the room. Kwame didn't argue. He just nodded, collected his papers, and walked out. The whispers started before he even reached the elevator. Guess they found out about him. Knew it was too good to be true. Should have stayed in his lane. As the elevator doors closed, Kwame looked at his reflection in the mirrored walls. His face was calm, but his eyes burned. "They can suspend me," he whispered, "but they can't stop the truth." That night, he sat in his apartment again, staring at the sealed file, the original copy he had hidden. It was the only thing that could clear his name. But he couldn't go to the board. They were compromised. He couldn't go to the police. They might be bought. So he made a choice. He picked up his phone and called a journalist, someone he had met months before, a young woman who once interviewed the company for a magazine story about diversity. "Mr. Mensah," her voice came through the line. "It's been a while. I have something," he said. "Something that could destroy careers, and save lives." There was a pause. "You sure you want to do this?" "I have no choice," he replied. "They've already tried to destroy me. If I stay silent, they win." They arranged to meet at midnight in a quiet cafe downtown. Kwame arrived early, sitting by the window, scanning every face that entered. Rain drizzled outside, blurring the streetlights. Then the door opened, and in walked the journalist, raincoat dripping, eyes sharp. She sat down across from him. "You look tired," she said. "I am," he admitted, sliding the file across the table. "But the truth never sleeps." She opened it, scanning the pages. Her eyes widened as she read. This is huge," she whispered. "These are government contracts, kickbacks, political donations. My God, this goes far beyond your company." Kwame nodded slowly. "Now you see why they want me gone." But before she could speak again, the cafe door opened. Two men in dark suits entered. Kwame's stomach turned cold. The same men who had taken him from the boardroom before. They spotted him instantly. "Mr. Mensah," one said firmly, approaching. "You need to come with us." The journalist stood up. "Who are you?" "Official business," the man said coldly. Kwame looked at her and whispered, "Go. Take the file. Don't stop running." She hesitated, but his eyes told her everything. She slipped the file into her bag and moved toward the back door as the men closed in. Kwame stood tall, blocking their path. "You can scare me," he said, "but you can't silence the truth." One man grabbed his arm. "You don't understand what you're doing." "I understand perfectly," Kwame said. "I'm doing what's right." The moment turned chaotic, chairs scraped, voices rose, the journalist vanished into the night. By the time the men realized she was gone, she was blocks away, file in hand, her phone already recording. The next morning, headlines broke across every major outlet. Corporate whistleblower exposes massive corruption ring, names linked to political figures. The story went viral. Kwame's face appeared everywhere, the man they mocked, the foreigner with the accent, now a national hero. The board scrambled to contain the damage. The chairman resigned. Several executives were arrested. And Brian, who had vanished weeks ago, was found trying to flee the country. But victory came at a cost. When the journalist returned to thank Kwame, his apartment was empty. The door unlocked. His phone on the table. His coat still hanging by the door. He was gone. No signs of struggle. No note. Just silence. The journalist filed a police report, but the case went nowhere. The last person who claimed to see him was a taxi driver who swore he dropped him off near the airport. But no ticket was ever bought. No flight records matched his name. Months passed. The company rebuilt under new leadership. Policies changed. But his office, Director Kwame Mensah's office, remained untouched. His chair sat by the window, his nameplate still on the desk. One evening, the journalist returned to that office to film a closing segment for the story. As she packed her camera, she noticed something strange, a small envelope tucked behind a drawer. She opened it, and inside was a handwritten note. It read, "The truth has a price, but silence costs the soul." If you're reading this, it means the story survived, and so did I. Tell them I'm not gone. I'm just watching from the shadows, making sure the gold still shines. The camera zoomed in on the note as the narrator's voice cut in, deep and powerful. They mocked his voice, but it was his truth that echoed the loudest. They tried to bury him, but they forgot, you can't bury a seed that was born to grow. Kwame Mensah didn't just expose corruption, he proved that no accent, no background, and no fear can silence the strength of integrity. Thunder rolled in the distance as the lights dimmed, the sound of rain tapping against the window. I'm not gone. I'm still watching.